We take a deeper look at what more is known about the suspected pipe bomber and the state of the investigation with Mary McCord. She helped lead the Department of Justice National Security Division during the Obama administration. It focuses on terrorism and other significant national security threats. She's now a visiting professor of law at Georgetown University. And J.M. Berger, he has written extensively about political violence. His latest book, Extremism, was recently published by MIT Press. He's also a research fellow at VoxPol. That's a European Union academic initiative to study online extremism. And we welcome both of you to the program. Mary McCord, to you first. What's your reaction to what we know so far about this man, the suspect?
Well, it does seem like it was extremely good and fast work by the FBI and all the other state and local law enforcement that assisted. They certainly did get lucky by the fact that the suspect left a fingerprint on one of the packages and is somebody known to law enforcement for whom his fingerprint was in the database. So congratulations, of course, to all the incredible law enforcement for solving this so rapidly. But of course, we don't know that the investigation will go on to make sure that there are no others involved, no other bombs out there already in the stream of mail or in delivery services, and that no one else that this suspect is working with.
J.M. Berger, it is the case that this investigation continues. We are looking at one person so far. We don't know if he's the only one involved. But looking at his portrait, there's been some description of him as a loner, someone who he did have some arrest record, most of it minor offenses. But what do you make of him, the person who's coming through here?
Well, he's definitely somebody who we know from his criminal record had a past history of violence. And, when we see acts that are terrorist in nature, as this attack is, we often see somebody who has that kind of background. What we see from his social media posts, we've seen 3 of his accounts so far. They're all very right-wing oriented. They're very pro-President Trump. And they're very threatening. So he engaged with and threatened a lot of people who were Democrats or on the left in some way or in Hollywood kind of celebrity figures.
And staying with you, J.M. Berger, did that make it, in your mind, does that make it easier to identify him, to find him ultimately, whether they decide whether he's guilty or not?
Well, I think certainly the fingerprints and the DNA are the conclusive evidence to find him quickly. There's a lot of this kind of content online. Really, we have a major problem on social media platforms with harassing and potentially violent content. So to try and approach it from searching the social media side of things is really a needle in a haystack kind of problem.
Mary McCord, how do you connect the dots here? Again, based on what we've seen of him and his apparent strong interest in politics, much of it, of course, pro-President Trump. What does it add up to at this point for you?
Well, what it adds up to really is this is a case, I think, that has every indication of being a case of domestic terrorism. And we don't have in the federal criminal code a crime of domestic terrorism by that name. There are other crimes, and I would be interested to see as the investigation proceeds and as the prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice take this to the grand jury, whether they might not add some other charges such as use of a weapon of mass destruction, which is a terrorism offense. It's not labeled domestic terrorism, but it is a terrorism offense. So I think that this is a classic case where if we had a federal crime of domestic terrorism, this kind of a case would be fitting to consider for indictment under that type of a charge.
J.M. Berger, as we said, your specialty, you've done so much work looking at extremism. Does the current hyper-divided political environment in the United States, does it tend to, in a situation like this, exacerbate people's tendencies who may have already had a tendency to be on the extremist end of the spectrum?
I think it does. We have a lot of research on this subject of how rhetoric affects behavior, and some of it is inconclusive as far as whether just exposure to extremist rhetoric without exposure to a social network makes somebody more prone to be violent. But what we do know is that extremist rhetoric and extremist ideologies shape violence. So, and you can see that very clearly in this case, that this man's actions were shaped by what President Trump has said about his opponents. The selection of his targets does not really lend itself to a lot of other explanations. We can see in his social media, he was very invested in conspiracy theories, and that may have also helped shape the action that he took. But those conspiracy theories are very much in sync with the president's rhetoric. So, I think that there is a legitimate issue that we should be talking about here in terms of how the current political environment is affecting people's behavior.
Mary McCord, what about that? The connection between the political environment, the broader political environment, which is very divided at this moment as we approach the midterm elections, and the tendency on the part of some people to be prepared to take extreme action like this?
Well, I would agree with a lot of what Jay has said. I mean, we've seen this in my background in national security. We see this in international terrorism as well. We see an extremist viewpoint and then a radicalization toward violence that starts with somebody, having certain types of ideologies, and as they progress toward extremism, sometimes not always, they will radicalize toward violence. And now we're seeing that, I think, here with some of the extremism in the United States right now. I happen to be doing this interview from Charlottesville, where, just a little over a year ago, we had white supremacists and neo-Nazis marching through the streets and engaging in violence. And so that their activity has been not condemned maybe as forcefully as it should have been by some of our leaders. And I think what we're seeing potentially with this case is, again, someone who has espoused certain views, political views, and has a discomfort or is very unhappy with those who criticize the current president and criticize his policies. And this person has taken his extremism to the next level, and he has really radicalized and seems to, by his actions, want to intimidate or coerce people into not speaking out and exercising, frankly, their right to free speech.
J.M. Berger, very quickly, what's your main question that you have at this point about this case?
What we'll be looking for is to find out if he followed a specific kind of ideology. So the social media accounts we've seen so far are very undirected. There's not a clear indication that he was involved in a particular brand of extremism and whether he was involved in an extremist community. I think it's likely that we will find that he has other social media accounts that are not under his name and not as easy to find. And once we see those, we'll have a better sense of really what motivated him.
J.M. Berger, Mary McCord, we thank you both.